Hi Guy, welcome back to CBS Beyond the Gates spoilers. Ashley hadn't waited this long just to let her anger fade away. Time in Fairmont Crest moved in a strange, polished rhythm. People still smiled, still clinked glasses, still exchanged perfectly rehearsed compliments under chandeliers. And soft music, but beneath that immaculate surface lived a quieter violence, envy dressed as concern, sabotage disguised as coincidence, power plays executed with a calm that made them even more lethal. For Ashley, Derek's interference wasn't simply an obstacle in her path. It was a deliberate violation of her dignity, her credibility, and the future she had fought to build with her own hands. She understood now that Derek hadn't acted impulsively or accidentally. He had chosen destruction as a method of control, as if every step Ashley took was something he had the right to crush whenever he felt threatened. That realization didn't just ignite her rage, it chilled her too, because it revealed how long she had been viewed as a target. The most terrifying part wasn't that Derek could disrupt her work, but that he could do it while maintaining the illusion of innocence, while still walking through Fairmont Crest as someone respectable, someone reliable, someone who could easily turn the crowd against Ashley the moment she pushed back too hard. She could not let him keep that advantage. She could not allow her collaboration project with a powerful Dupree figure to become Derek's private playground for ruin. That partnership wasn't merely a career milestone. It was Ashley's bridge out of being underestimated. Her one chance to step into the upper tier of influence in Fairmont Crest, without begging for approval or leaning on anyone else's shadow. And if Derek was aiming at it, then he was aiming at cutting off her future at the exact moment it mattered most. Ashley didn't act on raw impulse, even though the fury in her chest was strong enough to make her hands tremble. Whenever she pictured Derek's face, she knew that if she wanted him to fall, she had to make the fall unavoidable. In Fairmont Crest, a person didn't get destroyed by accusation. They got destroyed by timing, by proof, by the kind of truth that left no space for charm or denial. So Ashley prepared in silence. She didn't broadcast her pain. She didn't rush. She moved patiently, like someone tightening a knot one strand at a time, waiting for the exact moment to pull hard enough for it to lock. Every piece of evidence she secured hurt more than the last, because it confirmed what her heart had once refused to believe. Derek's sabotage was planned, sustained, and calculated. He had tracked her progress, targeted her pressure points, planted disruptions small enough to look like normal setbacks, yet sharp enough to bleed her momentum dry. The ugliness of it was how quiet it was. Derek's sabotage wasn't loud. It was rot spreading beneath paint, only noticeable once the structure started to weaken. Ashley hated herself for not seeing it earlier, for letting herself accept the problems as typical complications in a major project, for forcing optimism onto situations that kept turning against her. But the deeper she dug, the clearer the pattern became. Derek hadn't simply interfered, he had engineered her humiliation, forcing her to explain and re-explain delays to the Dupree side until she looked incompetent, unstable, unprepared. Ashley despised that feeling more than anything, being reduced to someone who was always defending herself, always proving she deserved the space she occupied. And worse, she realized Derek wanted her exhausted. He wanted her to retreat voluntarily so he could claim victory without consequences. In the days leading up to Fairmont Crest's major community event, Ashley lived inside tension. On the outside, she stayed composed. She attended meetings, kept her posture steady, delivered calm updates as if everything was under control. But inside, every minute felt like war. She understood she was placing everything on one moment, the public reveal. If she executed it perfectly, Derek wouldn't just lose face, he would lose position, protection, and the privilege of harming others without accountability. But if she miscalculated, if her approach looked too emotional or too aggressive, Fairmont Crest would punish her for ruining the illusion of harmony. That was the cruelty of places like this. The person who exposes corruption often becomes the one blamed for making things uncomfortable. Ashley refused to be naive about the Duprees, either. They were her partners, yes, but their loyalty belonged first to their name, their reputation, and their advantage. Ashley couldn't count on them to defend her simply because she was right. She could only make supporting her the most logical, least damaging option. That was the difference between survival and disaster in Fairmont Crest, not morality, but leverage. The fundraiser finally arrived, and it was exactly what Fairmont Crest always manufactured: elegant, polished, expensive, and tightly controlled. The air was thick with perfume and wealth and quiet ambition. Compliments floated like decorative birds, beautiful, trained, and hollow. Ashley walked into the space with the unsettling sense that everyone was already cast in a role. She had a role, too, one that she'd been forced into for years, the young woman trying to prove herself, the ambitious one who needs guidance, the outsider who should be grateful. Derek had his role as well. And he wore it flawlessly, charming, measured, attentive. The kind of man who made people feel safe simply by speaking to them. When Ashley saw him laughing among the crowd, her rage didn't explode into flames, it condensed into something heavier, hotter, and more dangerous. In that moment, Ashley understood the true scope of what Derek had been doing. He wasn't just trying to ruin the project. He was trying to ruin her standing in the eyes of the people who could define her future. She realized she had been placed on a chessboard long before she knew the game had started. And tonight was the night she flipped the table. Ashley chose her moment with precision. She didn't wait for Derek's permission. She didn't wait for anyone to hand her a microphone as if her truth required approval. When the room drifted into its usual comfortable rhythm of speeches and gratitude and rehearsed optimism, Ashley stepped forward. The silence that followed felt like a wire pulled too tight. She didn't soften her words. She didn't wrap the truth in polite phrasing. She called Derek out by name. And that single act was like throwing a stone into a lake that had been artificially kept still. For years, heads turned, glasses paused midair, smiles froze. Ashley felt the shock ripple through the room, but she didn't stop. She knew hesitation would invite fear to swallow her. So she went straight to the point and made it impossible to misunderstand. Derek had committed deliberate sabotage against her collaboration project. With a powerful Dupree figure, the difference between Ashley tonight and the Ashley who had endured in silence for so long was simple. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She wasn't pleading to be believed. She was presenting facts like a verdict. The evidence she had prepared was structured, clear, and devastating details that formed a single unbreakable narrative of intent and interference. No longer feelings. No longer suspicion. It was proof. The room shifted from curiosity to dread. Because everyone understood what proof meant in a place built on appearances. Ashley didn't need to shout. Her calmness did the damage for her. Calm meant certainty. Calm meant she was ready for consequences. She looked directly at Derek, and for a brief moment she saw his expression fracture. It was the smallest shift, a flicker of alarm behind his practiced face, but it was enough. Ashley knew then she had reached the nerve. Derek could perform, but truth always found a way to crack the mask. Ashley also refused to let anyone frame this as a petty personal dispute. She made Derek's real target unmistakable. He wanted to destroy the project itself. The collaboration tied to Dupree influence. That detail changed everything. The room understood immediately that this wasn't just about two people clashing, it was about power being challenged, about a Dupree interest being attacked in public. Ashley knew she was taking a dangerous risk by pulling the Duprees into the center of the storm. But she also knew it was her only strategy. If this became a Dupree problem, it couldn't be dismissed quietly. Still, her hands were metaphorically resting on a blade. The same move that could force protection could also make her disposable. If the Duprees decided the safest path was eliminating the source of exposure, Ashley felt that cold realization rise in her chest. Because winning in Fairmont Crest didn't guarantee safety. It only guaranteed attention. The reaction from the Dupree figure present was immediate, silent, heavy, undeniable. There was no need for an outburst. In Fairmont Crest, true power didn't have to raise its voice. The shift in posture, the stillness in the gaze, the sudden drop in warmth in the room was enough to confirm that Ashley's accusation had struck a nerve far beyond Derek. A delayed project wasn't just a financial problem. It was a signal of weakness, a public sign that something had slipped through Dupree control. And Dupree control was a brand, a reputation, a fortress image. If that fortress looked vulnerable, even for a moment, it invited predators. Ashley could sense the urgency building behind the Dupree figure's convoyed. Decisions would be made, doors would close, calls would be placed, damage would be calculated. Ashley had forced the family into a corner where they had to choose either acknowledge sabotage and punish Derek or bury the truth and accept the risk of a larger scandal later. Either way, the night no longer belonged to celebration. It belonged to consequence. Derek's public humiliation was no longer avoidable. Ashley had designed it that way because she knew Derek feared only one thing, being exposed in front of the audience. He worked so hard to impress. In Fairmont Crest, reputation was currency. It was the invisible ticket into private rooms, confidential deals, and untouchable social circles. Once Derek was marked as a saboteur, or worse, as someone reckless enough to strike at Dupree interest, would lose more than a project. He would lose access, trust, and protection. The social punishment started instantly. It didn't need shouting. It didn't need outrage. It arrived as avoidance, as frozen expressions. As the subtle widening of space around Derek, like the room itself no longer wanted to touch him. Ashley knew the legal consequences could follow, but the social collapse was already happening. Fairmont Crest's cruelty was always quiet. It punished people by turning away. And yet, Ashley's victory didn't taste sweet. The moment she finished, after the evidence had been laid bare and the room had absorbed the impact, she felt a strange emptiness settle over her. She had done what she had to do, but her heart wasn't lighter. If anything, it was heavier with the awareness of what came next. She scanned the room and saw the truth that always lived behind Fairmont Crest smiles. People might agree with her, might respect her courage, but very few would stand close to a fire. They would watch from a safe distance. They would let Ashley take the risk alone. And they would only offer public support once they were certain the outcome wouldn't burn them too. Ashley understood that isolation deeply. She also understood something else. Derek, even cornered, wasn't harmless. Men like him rarely fall without dragging someone down with them. And the most dangerous version of Derek would be the one who felt he had nothing left to lose. Ashley reinforced her determination to protect the project not for applause, but for herself. She needed to hear her own resolve out loud because she couldn't afford to shake now. The collaboration with the Duprees was her future. Her proof that she wasn't a person to be controlled or crushed. But even as she held that line, a colder fear moved inside her. She had placed herself under the brightest spotlight possible. The Duprees would reassess everything: the project, the risk, the public narrative, and Ashley's usefulness to their reputation. They might protect her, or they might use her as a shield to absorb fallout. Ashley recognized the brutal logic of powerful families. They didn't always care who was innocent. They cared what kept the structure standing. And she had just exposed a crack in their structure in front of the entire community. That meant her win could become a liability. As the guests began to disperse into whispered conversations and urgent phone calls, Ashley remained still, feeling her heartbeat steady but heavy. She didn't look back at Derek for long, but she didn't have to. She could sense him. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't acting. His humiliation had tightened something inside him, and Ashley didn't like the way his silence felt. It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like calculation. In places like Fairmont Crest, defeat didn't always arrive with collapse. Sometimes it arrived with a slow, dangerous retreat before the strike returned sharper and more personal. Ashley knew Derek would try to recover control. He would try to punish her for taking it from him. And she understood this world well enough to know revenge didn't always come through courts and paperwork. It came through closed doors, canceled opportunities, reputations quietly poisoned until no one could explain why Ashley suddenly had fewer allies. The Duprees could not ignore what happened tonight. Their presence at the event had been meant to reinforce stability and dominance. Yet Ashley had turned the evening into an emergency problem of public exposure and internal damage control. The collaboration project stood at risk of delay, and delay would create a vacuum for rumors to grow. Ashley knew it, and she refused to leave with the illusion that she had already won the war. She had won a public battle, yes, but in Fairmont Crest, public battles were only the start. She had fired the shot that announced open conflict. And conflicts here didn't end quickly. They evolved. They became quieter, more strategic, more poisonous. The light Ashley had forced onto Derek would also reveal other things: hidden alliances, deeper motives, the kind of secrets that thrived in darkness. Ashley felt the weight of that realization settle like ice down her spine. When she finally stepped away from the lavish venue, Ashley felt as though she had torn a chain from her neck. She took a deep breath, but the relief didn't come. Instead, her mind raced through possibilities. Derek investigated, Derek isolated, Derek retaliating, the Duprees protecting the project, the Duprees protecting their name, the community siding with truth or siding with comfort. Everything moved like pieces sliding on a board. And Ashley couldn't ignore the sense that she was still trapped inside a much larger game. She had acted for justice, and she had acted for survival. But Fairmont Crest rarely allowed anyone to win cleanly. It always demanded a price. Ashley didn't know what her price would be yet. She only knew she had refused to die quietly. And just as she thought she had endured enough weight for one night, one last realization tightened her stomach. Derek's silence was not the silence of a man defeated. It was the silence of a man choosing his next weapon. Ashley didn't turn to look at him again. Yet she felt his presence like a shadow clinging to her back, cold and patient, as if he had memorized every second of her public destruction of him. In that moment, Ashley understood the most frightening truth of all: Derek's humiliation might be the beginning of his collapse. But it might also be the moment he decided he no longer had anything to lose. And that was the kind of man who could become far more dangerous than the one who still had a reputation to protect. Leslie had never been the kind of woman who accepted being pushed out of the game quietly. In Fairmont Crest, silence could be more terrifying than screaming, because it was often the clearest sign that someone was swallowing humiliation, waiting, sharpening their patience into a weapon. And this time, that silence belonged to Leslie. Ever since Ted and Shanice went public with their relationship, something inside Leslie had been stretched to the point of breaking. It wasn't only jealousy that burned through her. It was the feeling of being erased, of being replaced, of watching a man she had once viewed as both a prize and a strategy choose someone else, without hesitation. In Leslie's world, a man like Ted was not supposed to walk away cleanly. He was supposed to hesitate. He was supposed to feel guilty. He was supposed to be torn. But Ted wasn't torn at all. Shanice, glowing with confidence and new certainty, became the living proof that Leslie could be treated like an afterthought. That was the one thing Leslie could never tolerate. She could endure rejection. She could endure disappointment. But she could not endure being made irrelevant. What made Leslie's fury dangerous was that it didn't explode loudly. It froze. It hardened. It sharpened into something cold enough to cut. She understood that if she wanted Shanice to fall, she couldn't attack like a desperate woman thrown into a fit of jealousy. She needed a stage large enough to make the humiliation permanent, a setting elegant enough that cruelty could be disguised as concern, and a crowd influential enough to spread the damage like smoke into every corner of Fairmont Crest. Leslie knew the perfect place for that kind of destruction was a charity event. In Fairmont Crest, charity wasn't only generosity, it was a shield, a status symbol, a mask so bright it could blind people to the ugliness beneath it. Leslie understood that truth as intimately as breathing. If she wanted to tear Shanice apart without appearing monstrous, she would do it under chandeliers and soft music, wrapped in the language of community and kindness. So Leslie planned her public counterattack in silence. She didn't rush. She didn't show her hand. She turned her anger into strategy. Building the night like a flawless performance, the venue had to be luxurious enough to draw the elite. The guest list had to include people whose whispers carried power, and the room had to be filled with the kind of influence that could lift someone into acceptance or destroy them with a single doubt. Leslie didn't want Shanice embarrassed in a private corner. She wanted Shanice exposed in the center of the light, where shame would stick to her skin like smoke and never fully wash away. She wanted Ted to stand there and feel helpless, unable to stop the social storm closing around the woman he chose. Leslie didn't want to hurt Shanice once. She wanted to make Shanice lose her place, lose her credibility, lose the right to enter the same rooms Ted belonged to. The charity gala arrived exactly as Leslie designed it, grand, glamorous, and almost too perfect. Like a beautifully decorated trap, Fairmont Crest looked radiant that night, wrapped in soft lighting and polished elegance, as if nothing ugly could ever exist behind its gates. Laughter floated through the room, glasses clinked, compliments were exchanged like currency. Everyone claimed they were there for goodwill, for the community, for a meaningful cause. But Leslie knew most of them were there for something far more irresistible than charity. A chance to be seen, a chance to position themselves near power, a chance to witness drama without being the one bleeding. And Leslie intended to give them exactly that. Shanice arrived believing love was armor. She entered with the confidence of a woman who had Ted openly beside her, as if his presence alone could protect her from the cruelty of Fairmont Crest. But that confidence only made Leslie more determined to break her. Leslie didn't want Shanice to lose Ted. She wanted Shanice to lose the belief that she deserved him. She wanted Shanice to look around the room and feel every gaze sharpen into a blade. And Leslie began the way she always did, not with a direct attack, but with suggestion, with implication, with quiet poison dropped into sweet conversations. In small, carefully timed exchanges, Leslie casually mentioned Shanice's mysterious past in ways that sounded harmless, almost curious, as if she were simply helping people understand who Shanice truly was. She didn't need proof. She didn't need facts. In Fairmont Crest, suspicion alone could kill a reputation. The rumors spread quickly, not loudly, but efficiently. They didn't travel straight, they slithered through the room, changing shape as they moved. One person caught half a sentence, another added an assumption, a third turned it into a full story. Within minutes, Shanice's past became something too messy and too undefined to defend against. Because it was no longer one accusation, it was many versions of the same shadow. Leslie understood that was the power of gossip. It didn't need to be true. It only needed to be believable. And once the seed was planted, Leslie pushed harder. Her comments became sharper, more direct, more openly cruel beneath their polished delivery. She implied Shanice didn't deserve Ted. She hinted Shanice was not worthy of the life Ted represented. She made it sound as though Shanice's presence in his world was an insult to the standards Fairmont Crest believed it owned. Shanice felt the air change before she even understood why. It began with the stare that lasted too long, the smile that didn't reach someone's eyes, the conversation that ended the moment she stepped close, The humiliation didn't hit like a slap, it tightened like a slow hand closing around her throat. Shanice fought to stay composed, to keep her posture steady, to hold her dignity in place even while heat rushed to her skin. She could feel herself becoming entertainment, reduced to a scandalous subject people could whisper about while holding expensive glasses. She had been turned into a story for the elite to enjoy, as if her life were a side dish at their elegant table. And in that moment, Shanice understood Leslie's real intention. This wasn't discomfort. This was destruction. Ted, standing beside her, felt the pressure rise like a weight pressing into his chest. He could not ignore it. He could not pretend it was harmless society drama. He looked at Leslie and recognized something colder than jealousy in her eyes. He saw control. He saw satisfaction. He saw the hunger of someone who wanted power more than peace. Ted tried to defend Shanice the only way he could be, staying with her, by refusing to be ashamed of her, by making it visible that he would not abandon her in front of these people. But Leslie had anticipated that too, because Leslie's goal wasn't only to humiliate Shanice. It was to trap Ted inside the humiliation, to make him feel punished for choosing her, to make him doubt the cost of his loyalty. Ted held his ground, yet he couldn't fully escape the discomfort of being judged by an entire community that measured love against status and always preferred seeing someone stumble. Fairmont Crest's elite reacted exactly as Leslie expected, with fascination, division, and cruelty disguised as concern. Some sided with Leslie because they admired her ability to command attention, to speak what others thought but never dared say aloud. They saw Shanice as a destabilizing figure, someone with uncertain roots who could disrupt the order they protected. Others felt Leslie was going too far, but they stayed silent, because defending someone publicly in Fairmont Crest often meant becoming the next target. The division only made the atmosphere more toxic because it turned Shanice into an argument, a debate about morality and worthiness rather than a human being. No one asked how Shanice felt. They only discussed what she represented. Leslie, watching it all unfold, believed she had already won. She saw Shanice tense, saw Ted trapped in discomfort, saw the rumors spreading like a web across the room. Leslie felt her control returning, felt her power rising. But in the moment she convinced herself she had successfully broken Shanice, the unexpected happened. A powerful figure within the Fairmont Crest circle suddenly stepped forward to defend Shanice, shifting the room's energy in an instant. It didn't require chaos or spectacle. In a world like this, a single clear act of support from the right person carried enough weight to freeze the crowd and disrupt the hunt. That defense did more than protect Shanice from total collapse, it forced Leslie into the light, in a way she hadn't planned. Suddenly, Leslie's attack no longer looked like a noble warning. It looked like a calculated attempt to destroy someone. The spotlight shifted, and Leslie felt the danger of it immediately. Fairmont Crest might forgive ambition, but it rarely forgave recklessness. The people who had smiled with Leslie began to measure their distance, not out of sympathy for Shanice, but out of fear of being associated with a mess that could stain them. The event Leslie had designed to elevate her could now become proof of how far she was willing to go to win. And even though Leslie maintained her composure, something inside her cracked at the thought of losing the relationships she depended on, connections she had always treated like armor. Shanice, still wounded, still burning with humiliation, felt a slight shift in the air the moment she realized she was not completely alone. That unexpected defense was like a life raft in cold water. It didn't erase what had been done to her, but it reminded the room that Leslie wasn't the only one with influence. Ted looked at Shanice and understood that even if they walked out of the gala together, they would not walk out of its consequences. Rumors survived longer than truth. Suspicion lingered longer than facts. And Leslie would not stop simply because one move had been blocked. Ted recognized Leslie's real power. She didn't need to destroy Shanice in one night. She only needed to make life suffocating enough that Shanice would eventually retreat on her own. When the gala ended, no one truly walked away untouched. Leslie didn't achieve the perfect public defeat she wanted for Shanice, but she still managed to plant a crack in Shanice's image. Shanice didn't fall apart in the room, but she had been publicly stained in a way that would take time to clean. Ted didn't abandon Shanice, yet he had now seen the price of choosing her in a community where love was always weighed against reputation. And Leslie, who had arrived intending to humiliate someone else, left facing consequences she never expected, the possibility of damaging the very relationships she relied on to maintain her position. Leslie walked away from the glittering lights with her pride intact on the outside, but inside she burned with a darker humiliation. Being stopped before she could deliver a final blow didn't calm her down. It made her more dangerous. She hated being blocked. She hated being questioned. She hated the feeling of someone else daring to interfere with her control. The gala might have ended as a successful charity event in appearance, but beneath the surface, it had become the opening shot of a deeper war about power, belonging, and who Fairmont Crest would allow to stand beside Ted in the public eye. And as Leslie slipped away from the event, one chilling realization settled into her mind like a quiet slap. That influential figure hadn't defended Shanice out of pure kindness. In Fairmont Crest, no one moved without a reason. If someone powerful had chosen to protect Shanice in front of the elite, it meant Shanice carried value Leslie didn't fully understand yet. In that moment, Leslie recognized the conflict had already grown beyond jealousy, beyond romance, beyond a simple social rivalry. It was leading towards something bigger, something hidden, something dangerous enough to shift alliances overnight. And worst of all, Leslie had just revealed to everyone how far she was willing to go to win, which meant if that secret ever exploded, she might be the first person Fairmont Crest decided to sacrifice. The Beyond the Gates CBS Spoilers channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the series from the perspective of a longtime fan. This allows viewers to gain deeper, more objective, and interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the series.